funny story about a man and his wife, and they went to a really, really nice, just super stinking nice restaurant. You know, one of those that with tablecloths, and you almost feel a little bit weird going in there like you're going to do something wrong. It was a really nice restaurant. You remember going in there and sitting down, and you know, I guess if you don't frequent those places often, you kind of, you know, it's like, which fork do I use first, you know, and you're trying to figure it out. But they went into the restaurant, he and his wife sitting down, and they're just kind of like, ooh, you know, nice. And so they brought out the salads, and they began to eat the salads, and as he was eating the salad, he said that this object that he perceived to be an olive that was in the salad, he kind of lost control of it, and it flipped off the plate, rolled off the table, and rolled onto the floor, and kind of went on. He was like, oh, I hope nobody saw that. And then out of nowhere, there was a man that was behind a curtain that just popped out of the curtain, went down, scooped up the olive, and went back behind the curtain and was gone. He was like, oh my God, did you see that? There was a dude behind the curtain that just got my olive. He was like, I didn't even know he was there. He was like, ooh, this is a really nice restaurant. You know, they pick up after you, you know? And he got to thinking, gosh, I think he'd do it again. And so he's like, okay, well, there's one more olive there. And so he just kind of took the olive and, you know, chucked it on the floor. And sure enough, the guy scooped out, got the olive, went back in the curtain. While sometimes unseen, God is there. His presence is there. You know this. You know the scripture, Psalm 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now that's a swamp moment right there. The shadow of death. My goodness. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I had to do a funeral this week of someone who I did not know. I knew the family. And I remember it's really weird. Every time I go to a funeral, I go there, and I have no fear of death because I understand what's happening. The person was either born again or they're not. And that's the point of concern and sadness, for sure, if there is, or joy. If they're a believer, if they know the Lord, there is total joy there because they're with Him for all eternity. If they did not know Him, they're not in heaven, but they're in hell, and that is weeping, that is sorrowful. That's for sure. But the issue of death, I don't face that with confusion, and I don't face that with fear. And the reason why is because I understand what God has done. And there was a time in my life when it wasn't that way. I was very fearful of death. And it terrified me to go to any type of funeral because I was so afraid of it. But you know what? The fear is not there anymore. And the thing that took that away was the understanding of who God is and His presence. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Hebrews 13:5. Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. You are in the storm with His presence, by His appointment, with His presence. And number 3, you're in the storm for His purpose. You are in the storm for His purpose. Well, what do you mean, Andrew? What are you saying? Okay, why would it be God's purpose for me to go through something very difficult and be in a storm? Well, because God can do something and will do something in you that He can't do any other way, lest you be in the storm. Let's look at the disciples in the boat. Okay, the disciples were fearful. They were fearful of death, as any of us would be. And this was early on. This was in Mark chapter 4. This was early on when they were, I don't know how long they'd been with Jesus at this time, but it hadn't been long. But they were going to be with Him a lot more than this. And after this incident, they saw His power displayed in multiple ways. They saw His character. They saw the authority of His teaching and what He said and the words that He spoke. And then they watched Him die and have His own moment where He faced death. And then they saw Him alive again, resurrected from the grave. And so they went from a point of being fearful to death to going and seeing all of who Jesus was and even seeing Him triumph over the very thing that they were fearful. And I want to tell you that 10 of those guys that were in the boat, later, after Jesus went to be with heaven and they went out to tell people about Him, 10 of them went to their grave, killed for the gospel of Christ. And so here's the interesting point. At one point, the thing that they were so fearful of, death, they gladly marched into it with absolutely no fear. Now, Jesus calmed the storm on that day, and that was a miracle. But the even greater miracle that would happen was what happened in their heart. You see that? Sometimes it's a little bit harder to see. But there was a miracle of triumphing over that fear. Let's talk about your storm, where you're at right now. You've prayed, and you've said, God, miracle, I need it. Get me out of this storm. Change this thing. Whatever. Heal. Help. Bring back together. Put it together. Change it. Get me out of it. Take it away. Whatever it is you're praying. You prayed. No answer. No answer. God. You start to say, God, where are you? Are you there? Are you really able? Do you care? Just remember, when you start to feel that way, by His appointment, you're there with His presence, and it's for His purpose. Let me tell you a story that happened, something that happened to me not too long ago. But let me just tell this first. And I probably shouldn't be admitting this to you as a pastor, but I'm going to. And I have never been depressed in my life. I cannot think of a time that I've been depressed. And I'm just kind of one of those people, it's like if something goes wrong, it's like, let's just go to Dairy Queen, and just put the music up a little louder, and let's just have some fun. I mean, the world's fun over the day, let's just go do something, And I've never faced that. And I've seen people that have been so depressed, they're like, oh, and I'm like, stop it, you gotta, shake them loose. And I almost, to the point of maybe not having the kind of compassion that I should, for people that are going through some very difficult things, because I just couldn't understand it. And not too long ago, there was a moment, a season in my life where I think I was depressed. And there were some things that were happening that were like storms. And I remember just feeling really down and really low. And I remember even thinking, gosh, I don't know this feeling. I don't feel this way. What is going on? And I remember thinking, it's just like I could not break out of it. And I remember thinking, you know what? This must be what it's like. It was very real. And I'm like, boy, this really is real. This really does happen. And I remember at that moment even having some prayer times with God and going, God, where are you? And even kind of getting a little bit mad at Him. And this hasn't been real long ago. I mean, I know Him. It wasn't that there was some confusion about Him. It wasn't that I didn't know Him. I did. But it kind of get to that point where you kind of want to, well, you've been silent a little bit too long. Now, come on. What's happening? And getting to that point. And then I remember right over the edge of that point was kind of this thing of, God, it doesn't matter. Whatever happens, you're God. No matter what I think or what I feel, that's where you're at. I love you and I will serve you. And if I feel this way the rest of my life, that's good enough because I know what you've done for me on the cross. That's it. Okay, next section. Move on. When I got to that point, not soon after that, that depression lifted and it was gone completely. Now, I do believe that was kind of a miracle. But the real miracle that happened was that God did something in my heart He could not have done any other way. And I'm not going to go so far as to say God caused me to feel that way. He might have. I don't know. But I honestly feel like He did that so that number one, my relationship could be strengthened with Him a bit. And then also that maybe that I could understand what other people are going through whenever they say I'm having a hard time. Because I didn't have quite the compassion maybe that I needed to. Now, I see that on this side of it. And I'm not sure if there's... Now, He could have told that to me, and I already understood that. I already knew that in here. But now I know it here. And when somebody comes to me and they sit and they tell me these things, it's like, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I could not have learned that any other way than having to go through a storm.